Welcome to This Week in Wrestling History.
All right, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Wrestling History. Your host, as always, I'm Ryan.
And I'm Jacob.
And let's see. This week we've got again something different coming up. It'll be in a similar style as our last couple of weeks here. But you want to intro this one?
So again, I don't think there's going to be a way for us to get through this without swearing at some point. So here's your explicit language warning. We're going to be talking about TNA, Total Nonstop Action, No Surrender from 2008.
I think we might be able to do this one without swearing. I'm gonna try. I'll take that as a personal challenge.
I can't.
You're right out. All right,
nope,
that's fair.
I can't. It's supposedly during the quote unquote heyday of Impact.
Yeah. So background on my TNA experience is practically none. I never really watched TNA at all when it was on Spike TV. I certainly didn't try to keep up with it once it was off.
I was watching it quite a bit on Spike TV.
Okay.
Just as you know, an alternate to WWE because I hadn't quite found New Japan yet. So
gotcha. So yeah, I would probably actually be interested in following Impact now. It sounds like it's gotten much better from everything I've heard.
It's light years better than where it was. So I guess I'll kind of lead this one because I know a little bit more about it.
And I mean, all I really know about it is current WWE stars that came from Impact.
Yeah, there's quite a few of them, but there was also a lot of guys who jumped from WWE to Impact.
So that was going to be something I'm sure I'll touch on, is that TNA essentially was WCW Part 2, and not the good days of WCW Part 2 in a lot of ways.
Yeah, not even close. There was quite a bit that just should not have happened at all.
Right. Anything else going on in the wrestling world this week we want to touch on before we jump into things?
I'm sure we'll hit towards the end. We'll recap IWF that we went to last Friday.
Yep.
Just because there was a couple little shakeups.
Yeah, that IWF is really cool. So yeah, we'll definitely touch on that later on, probably in our little wrap up segment there.
Kind of a current event that's happening. Just thought it was a relatively big deal. Renee Young is now officially on the Raw commentary team and is the first woman to ever be permanently on the Raw commentary team.
Permanent female part of the broadcast team. That's awesome because she does a great job, and not just she does a great job for a girl. She does a great job.
When you get kudos from Vince McMahon and he doesn't give you anything to work on for the next week, I think you're going to do well.
Yeah, that's about as high as praise as you're probably going to be getting in the business.
Mm-hmm. So kudos to Renee Young. I think she's going to be amazing, and I can't wait to hear what she does leading up to the Evolution pay-per-view coming up.
Yeah, and so what they did is they just swapped basically her position with coaches, and so now we're going to have less coach and more Renee Young, which is kind of win-win on both fronts.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, coach seems like he's probably a decent guy, and he's an ESPN guy now, so he gets a little bit more of the word out on the business, but less can be more with the coach.
All right, so let's get into TNA Impact No Surrender 2008 from September 14th.
All right, let's do it.
September 14th, 2008, TNA No Surrender.
All right, September 14th, 2008, TNA No Surrender.
I'll start off by saying if you're going to ever watch Impact Wrestling or TNA, don't start here. Just don't save yourself the time. Just go on the internet, read the storylines, pick up from where it is now, and watch some of the really early stuff from like 2002.
Yeah, so first things first, let me actually just kind of burn through the recap super quick, and then we can actually discuss it in a little bit more in depth here. Okay. So yeah, it was a card. Hang on one second, let me pull up the matches in front of me. Yay for being prepared for our job here.
It definitely wasn't a barn burner by any means.
No. things of note, it was their first ever pay-per-view kind of like outside of Florida where they were based. So that was a thing, I suppose.
Yay for only selling 3,500 seats in Canada.
Yeah. All right. So first matchup on the card was the Prince Justice Brotherhood, which consisted of Curry Man, Shark Boy, and Super Eric versus the Rock and Rave Infection, being the team of Christy Hemme, Jimmy Rave, and Lance Rock. So this was an intergender match. The Prince Justice Brotherhood, Curry Man, a.k.a. Christopher Daniels, Shark Boy, and Super Eric, a.k.a. Eric Young of Sanity fame now.
Yep.
Went over the Rock and Rave Infection.
Lance Rock also being
Lance Hoyt. Or Lance Archer?
Kind of both.
Yeah, both.
Lance Hoyt was also very good on his own and also had a very good run with James Storm in America's... No, that was Wildcat Chris Harris. Never mind.
Nope. He's part of a tag team in New Japan now.
Yes.
That's what you're probably thinking of. All right. Next match up was Awesome Kong versus ODB in a Falls Count Anywhere match. Lots of tables involved in this one. Match number 3 was Abyss and Matt Morgan versus Team 3D, being Brother Devon and Brother Ray.
A.K.A. the Dudley Boys.
Yep. A.K.A. Thank You Trademark Infringement. Match number 4 was for the X Division Championship. It was Sheikh Abdul Bashir going over Consequences Creed and Petey Williams.
We'll get more into them later.
Yep. Just because we're going over who everyone is. Sheikh Abdul Bashir, better known as Sean Davari.
Yep. And
Consequences Creed, much better known as
Xavier Woods.
Yay! All right. Next we had a singles match for the TNA Women's Knockout Championship. It was the champion Taylor Wilde going over Angelina Love of the Beautiful People. Then we have the Ladder of Love match for the Hand of SoCal Val, featuring Sanjay Dutt versus Jay Lethal. Next up was the Tag Team Championship match. It was Beer Money Inc., which was James Storm and Robert Roode, better known as Bobby Roode.
Bobby.
With Jacqueline as their manager, I guess. Okay. Versus LAX, the Latin American Exchange, which was Hernandez and Homicide.
And then we ended with the next 2 matches as AJ Styles versus Frank Trigg in an MMA match. That there's a lot to talk about with that one. So
yeah, we're definitely going to go over that one. And then the final match of the evening was the 3 Ways to Glory match for the TNA World Heavyweight Championship, where our champion Samoa Joe defeated Christian Cage and Kurt Angle.
All right, so we'll take it all the way back from the top here and go back to the Rock and Rave Infection and what the hell was their name?
The Rock and Rave Infection versus the Prince Justice Trio or something.
So the only good thing that ever came out of any of that was Shark Boy doing a fake Stone Cold impression while he was wearing his Shark Boy outfit.
Yeah, so things I picked up on this match that I was particularly offended by. So it was kind of 2 things, but they really dovetailed together. First off, intergender match. Inherently, I have nothing wrong with the concept. I'm kind of sketchy on the idea of intergender matches, but in a tag match, it's going to go a little bit better, I think, usually.
Yeah.
That said, Christy Hemme is not the one to be doing them.
Especially when the other team doesn't have any female wrestlers on it.
Right. So it's a little bit odd. Christy Hemme, not a strong wrestler. Nothing against her. It's just not one of her skill sets.
Nope.
And the second one kind of dovetailed right into this was Christopher Daniels being wasted as Curry Man.
Possibly the biggest waste of Impact Wrestling's history.
And it became even worse when Christopher Daniels was really the only one that was in there with Christy Hemme for any notable length of time, probably because he was the best wrestler by far of anyone there and would take care of her and make her look the best. But they didn't do any real spots. they did a bunch of sexist crap and him oogling and feeling up Christy Hemme and trying to make out with her. And
Yeah, the story was that Curry Man was a ladies' man.
but he was just sexually assaulting her.
Yeah,
It was uncomfortable.
it was never anything good, and it never spawned anything good out of this. They ended up having a decently long program, which kind of upsets me because they didn't even bring in another female wrestler to help with Christy Hemme. It was literally just the six of them for like the next 2 months, I think it was.
Oh, this was such like a blow off match or something, and it just no.
No, this was kind of in the middle sort of peak of what they were doing, and then 2 months later it would come to a screeching halt.
I guess good on the screeching halt front because this never should have been.
No, there was no way that this should have ever been
Like
on a pay-per-view.
Shark Boy is straight up a comedy act,
Always will be, but he's got a little bit of
But-
entertaining.
which is fine. There's nothing wrong with being a comedy act. Super Eric was, at the time, Eric Young's gimmick. He actually went on to do more in TNA, right?
Oh yeah, he ended up being the heavyweight champ.
Yeah, he was champ for a bit. Yeah,
and also-
Insanity is definitely. I found Sanity in NXT really interesting. Haven't been keeping up with them on SmackDown as much. I assume they're being pretty much swept under the rug and not used.
they've maybe had 2 matches on television. He ended up also having the Knockouts Tag Team Champions, which is their women's division with ODB.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Eric at the time was a comedy act, totally fine. Christopher Daniels, I don't get why he wasn't in something more important. It seems like he was an afterthought here.
This was towards the end of the trio: Christopher Daniels, Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, crazy X Division matches that kind of put TNA on the map.
Was he transitioning more towards being with ROH full time at this
Yes.
point? Okay.
Yeah, he would show up as Curry Man or one-offs as Christopher Daniels at like reunion shows.
Okay,
and
so
big events.
he was kind of wrapping up the original TNA run.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess that kind of explains that. I don't know what the Rock and Rave infection were supposed to be, and I'm assuming they never did anything more than they did
Nope.
here.
Especially,
Okay.
I mean, come on, they're coming out with Guitar Hero guitars as their equipment.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Okay, next.
Next is Awesome Kong versus ODB.
I've seen ODB a few times, and she doesn't impress me. I mean,
There's nothing to her gimmick.
she's
She's quote unquote a redneck who likes to drink.
it's like you took the Stone Cold gimmick and took all of the anti-authority out of it.
And just made it a woman.
Yeah. I mean,
Exactly. That's exactly what she was.
she's big for a woman. I guess that's like a selling point for her.
I mean, she was what, like 5'6"?
Yeah,
Something
she
like
was
that.
tall and heavier, and I mean, not like she was out of shape like big gal. She was just, I'm much bigger than your average female wrestler at the
So
time.
I can bully people around and knock people around. But
Yeah.
then you put her against somebody like Awesome Kong, who's 6'2", almost 250,
Yeah,
who has been knocking people around in Impact for years at this point.
yeah. It was basically a hardcore match where these two women knocked the crap out of each other for a while, put each other through a table, and
This wasn't necessarily the best thing that came out of Impact's knockout division. For a long time, they were far, far ahead of where...
you could tell. I mean, the match wasn't bad. It was kind of your generic hardcore match.
Yeah, but the women's division around this time in Impact Wrestling was light years ahead of where WWE's was at the time.
Oh yeah, this was like prime divas.
Yeah. So if you wanted to see good female division wrestling, you would watch Impact because it was closer to what WWE has now
Yeah,
than anything WWE has had. When you have people like Gail Kim, who's a phenomenal talent, you can't not use them.
right. And I don't know if that's maybe just one of Awesome Kong's weaknesses because she's used to being the biggest person in the ring and not having anyone even remotely close. so that maybe this is a kind of a more difficult matchup for her to really.
Or she was more used to being carried through matches when she faced people like Gail Kim and
Right, maybe. Well, I mean, Awesome Kong had a pretty decent background coming from Japan, though, so.
she did, but I mean, her matches aside from personal opinion, her matches aside from the ones she had with Gail Kim were nothing special.
Fair enough. So, women's hardcore match, which I guess if nothing else, for the time that it wasn't just a overly protected divas style match, was notable.
Yeah, and they didn't cut them down to like a 3-minute match.
No, it was full blown match.
Yeah.
So, credit for that.
One little side note is that Awesome Kong had someone come out with her, and I can't remember her name. Something Saeed or something like that.
Yeah, I want to say it was cheerleader Melissa.
Yes.
On the Independence that's her character on the Independence.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of going for, is that it was cheerleader Melissa, who's done quite a bit on the independent scene, and she's actually relatively big in stardom over in Japan right now too. So
Awesome. So, yep.
all right, next we have tag team match, which has Team 3D, aka the Dudley Boys,
Yep.
against Abyss and Matt Morgan.
I have not seen a ton of Abyss, but what I have seen does not impress me whatsoever.
No. So Abyss was Impact Wrestling's take on like Undertaker
Yeah,
mixed with Mankind altogether.
He's their Undertaker, definitely.
But he had the hardcore stuff as Mankind. Like
Yeah.
he was always the guy who would be okay with getting thrown into a pile of glass or thumbtacks.
Right. We need a crazy stunt. Who's going to do it? Let's get Abyss to do it. He'll do anything.
Yeah. So he was teaming with Matt Morgan in this storyline where Matt Morgan was kind of helping him ease away from being super violent.
So we're going to take your one thing that you can do and get you away from that.
Yes.
That'll go well.
It did not. And he ended up going right back to being the monster Abyss and bringing a bag of thumbtacks out every time.
As if Matt Morgan is someone to tell people, get out of your comfort zone.
Right.
This guy, Matt Morgan's also not good.
He never was.
He looks good. He's a big guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's essentially the early days of Big Cass. Like 7 foot tall, lean, muscular guy, but had less wrestling ability than Big Cass did.
He's the kind of guy that definitely, especially around this point in time, Vince went crazy for. You're a giant dude. Cool, we're signing you. There was like Matt Morgan, Nathan Jones, Bobby Lashley the first time around.
Yeah. I mean, Matt Morgan was also in WWE for a short bit.
Yeah, this was after he was
Yeah.
there.
So Team 3D, the Dudley Boys, they carried this match.
Yeah.
They literally had all the spots. They went through and they told, because they're the workers, they're the best ones in the group. They told the story that Abyss and Morgan were trying to get through.
Yep. So, I mean, in terms of history here, there's really nothing to say here besides Team 3D did have a really long TNA run, and
they held the titles a couple of times, and while they were doing this, they were also with New Japan and won the IWGP heavyweight tag team titles.
Yeah. Biggest thing really I think that came out of Team 3D being in TNA was the Bully Ray character.
Yeah.
He found some more life as a singles wrestler. He got in better shape.
Yeah. And you could tell from here in 2008 up to even 2011 when he started kind of going into the Bully Ray character. From what I remember reading is he dropped almost like 65, 70 pounds.
Yeah, because I mean, he kind of looked like a big fat dude for a while.
Yeah.
And then he just looked like a big dude for a while.
Yeah. And he, towards the end of his TNA run, they put the heavyweight title on him 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, because they had the whole aces and eights thing, which...
Ugh.
Do we want to get into that now? The faction issues with TNA? Sorry, not WCW, but...
Might as well be the same thing.
Yep.
Why don't we get into it at the end, because
Sounds good.
that'll talk about the other stuff that's happening in the background of the whole pay-per-view.
So next up we had the X Division, which is really one of the main selling points of TNA.
It's essentially their cruiserweight division, but
it was never limited to cruiserweights.
There wasn't an actual weight limit to it. It was, their idea was anybody who can do the extreme stuff.
And by extreme, they meant more high flying rather than ECW style through tables stuff.
Right. It was more anybody who's going to put on an exciting match.
It was more the work rate title than
Yeah.
your heavyweight title was.
Yeah. So this one was Sheikh Abdul Bashir.
Again, Sean Davari and all right, so
Get it out of the way now.
yep. Here comes the swearing. This event took place on September 14th, 2008, 3 days after the anniversary of 9/11. Sean Davari, previously seen as just Davari of the manager for Muhammad Hassan in WWE, where they already got in some hot water for basically doing the "hey, look, we're terrorists" angle. They have this guy come to the ring to music which starts with an airplane screeching through the air.
And it's not even like we're any decent amount of time removed from the anniversary of 9/11. This is only 7 years later.
It's 7 years in 3 days. Like it's September 14th. It's just cringeworthy, and it's super. If you're going to use a stereotype in wrestling, it needs to be the stereotype punching up against oppression.
Right.
Like, a good take on it was a couple weeks ago when we were talking about $1 Million Man and Virgil. Okay, Virgil was a bit of a stereotype in the manservant role, but he was fighting up against the oppressor and won.
Right.
You don't go, hey, look, here's this stereotype that we're all angry at, and let's see how evil they are. Like,
So
that's not the way to do anything.
let me go back and preface this with one of the main writers for Impact Wrestling at this time, from 2004 mostly up until about 2012, was Vince Russo.
Fuck.
So if any of you know anything about wrestling history, Vince Russo is quite possibly one of the worst writers and comes up with some of the most cringeworthy angles in the entire history of professional wrestling. AKA when we talked a while back about Judy Bagwell on a pole or on a forklift match, or the Viagra on a pole match. All of this stuff was Vince Russo's brainchild.
Yeah, Vince Russo is basically the guy that takes any random idea that pops up in his head, throws it against the wall to see if it'll stick, and then yells at everyone else when it doesn't stick because it was an awful idea to begin with.
Again, he is the worst fucking writer in the history of professional wrestling. I can't stress that enough, that any angle this guy has anything to do with makes me want to cry.
So the only reason Vince Russo has any sort of job in professional wrestling was because he was originally involved with the WWF during the Attitude Era, and he was responsible for some of the better things in the Attitude Era, but the only reason they worked is because they got filtered through Vince McMahon, who for all of his problems and dumbass ideas was a way better filter than whatever Vince Russo left to his own devices is.
Vince Russo, when he was in Impact Wrestling, did not have a filter, because this was when Dixie Carter was president.
So
And there was no one for him to kind of
he didn't have to. Yeah, he was basically left to his own devices and let off the chain. And this was the guy that was basically responsible for WCW collapsing.
Yeah, he single-handedly brought about the end of WCW.
I don't know about single-handedly, but he was definitely a big cause.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyways, Davari comes out to this terribly offensive music. Match itself was fine.
Yeah, match was actually really good. I always liked the Consequences Creed gimmick, because it was essentially just Apollo Creed from Rocky.
Yeah.
And it was just
And
entertaining.
Watching this match was a great reminder of how good Xavier Woods can be.
Him on his own during his run in Impact Wrestling, he was fantastic. And I'm a little upset that he's not getting used the way that he should.
Yeah, he is capable of far more than he's allowed to show off in the New Day.
I mean, guy could easily be U.S. champ, Intercontinental champ on either show at this point.
He could definitely be easily in the mid-card division.
Yeah.
I don't think he's ever going to be a main eventer, but
I mean, I could see him going up and like having a pretty decent match with like AJ as like a quote unquote early contender, but never win the belt.
Sure, you could definitely put a mid-card belt on him and build him up to the point where he could be the random opponent for the champ on a given night on a TV show
And have the crowd pop real hard when he comes out.
Yeah, and it wouldn't feel wrong.
Right. So then you also had Petey Williams in this match, who for a long time in Impact was one of the Team Canada guys, which for a long time in Impact there was this faction called Team Canada, which was just all the Canadians thrown together.
Like you do.
So at this point he was kind of running a Scott Steiner style gimmick.
Yeah, he was Scott Steiner Jr., and it was really weird because he even had his own version of Medeja.
Yeah. It was funny because they would be standing next to each other when they were a tag team, and it literally looked like somebody shrunk Steiner and made him and like copied him.
Yeah.
So Daivari ends up going over and wins the X Division title off of Petey Williams. The one thing I'll say, a while back we were talking about Lance Storm being labeled as the heel when he went to Canada.
Yep.
They did not do that here.
Right. So, again, this was their first time doing a show from Canada. Petey Williams, normally a heel,
was played as a face to the hometown Canadian crowd, and it worked so well.
Right. If you know the crowd, especially in Canada, they're going to pop for Canadians. Whether they're heel or whether they're face, they're probably going to get popped.
Yeah, doesn't matter who it is. As long as they're Canadian, people are going to get excited about it. And they flipped it a little bit where Consequences Creed is normally the face out of this little trio.
Yep.
He was running as a kind of a tweener, more towards a heel by some of his actions.
Right, and because that made sense because he was very all in the red, white, and blue trunks. Like, again, as you said, he looked like Apollo Creed from Rocky 3 when he faced Russian guy, Dolph Lundgren, whatever his character's name was.
Drago.
There you go. So Canadian crowd's going to usually boo Americans a little bit just because that's how it works in the wrestling business.
Right. So it was just kind of interesting to see that at this point they had gotten it. One of the wrestling companies had gotten it right and kind of figured that part out.
Right. At least someone went, hey, we know the crowd's going to react a certain way. Let's use that.
Yeah. All right. So next match is Taylor Wilde, who's the Impact Wrestling champ. Impact Knockout champion.
Yep.
Against Angelina Love, who was at the time part of the stable, The Beautiful People.
All right. Question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything about the feud. Were the Beautiful People trying to say Taylor Wilde looked mannish or something as part of their shtick?
A lot of their shtick was that Taylor Wilde was kind of against joining the Beautiful People because she didn't dress like them. She didn't put her hair up like them, things like that.
Okay. The reason I ask is because when Taylor Wilde was coming out, the cameras cut to a guy in the crowd with a sign that said Tyler Wilde, and I was trying to figure out if that was part of the feud or if their production team was really just that bad and this guy's sign was that dumb.
I mean, it could have been a mix of both, but from what I remember of the whole feud was the Beautiful People's entire gimmick was they were heels for a long time.
Yeah,
where they would go after somebody who didn't either dress like them or who wasn't quote unquote as pretty as them, kind of thing.
So WWF actually ended up ripping that off with I don't think they ever gave it a name, but it was over on SmackDown. Some of the divas. It was the two divas that held the belt at the same time.
Oh, Michelle McCool and Layla.
Laycool, yes.
Yeah, they kind of ran with that for quite a while in Impact. They had a long run together. You have Angelina Love, who was kind of the quote-unquote leader and who was wrestling mostly. Velvet Sky would wrestle every now and then. She wasn't that great. She wasn't on Angelina Love's level. Angelina Love was a really good performer.
Okay.
And she always played the heel much better. They also had finally added a male member to the Beautiful People, and this was Cute Kip.
Cute Kip. I'm sure I've never heard of this gentleman in any other part of the business whatsoever.
You might be wrong.
Oh, really?
So this was actually in Impact. He was Kip James.
Yep.
Who would also be known as the Ass Man, Billy Gunn.
Yep. So that came from him teaming with Brian James, and I think they went as the James Gang here.
They were the James Gang for a little bit, and then they were Voodoo Kin Mafia.
Yeah.
VKM, a.k.a. Vincent Kennedy McMahon, and they trashed WWE for a couple months.
Yeah, which, hey, it's the wrestling business. Apparently, no hard feelings on that one because they both went back to WWE a couple of years later.
So Taylor Wilde needed help to kind of equalize Cute Kip, and she brought out Rhino.
Yeah, he came trucking down to the ring.
Yeah, almost knocked her out of the ring when he came sliding in.
Yep.
Again, overall, it was a decent match. Again, because it was the Knockouts Championship, light years ahead of where WWE was at the time.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. They actually had women's wrestling instead of trying to bring out the best models they could find that were willing to get into a wrestling ring.
Right, who would be okay with, quote-unquote, taking the fake punch.
Yeah, so I will definitely give TNA that. The women's division was just light years ahead of the Divas.
Yeah. Taylor Wilde goes over and retains her belt. They go on to have another match at Taylor Wilde, Angelina Love, and Awesome Kong have a match at Bound for Glory, which is essentially their WrestleMania.
Yeah, their big one for the year.
And Awesome Kong ends up taking the belt off of Taylor Wilde. She sticks around for a little bit longer when she ends up being one half of the first ever Knockouts Tag Team Champs, and then just kind of fades off after that.
Was going back a little bit. Awesome Kong, was her run as Karma right after, soon after this, right?
It was relatively soon after this, but it was very short, and she went right back to Impact Wrestling.
Yeah,
after
Karma
she got
was
let go.
an unfortunate try at stuff that didn't quite pan out, but
I mean, it would have been fine if she hadn't been hiding her pregnancy from the company.
There was just a lot of weird little things that could have been different, and honestly, it may have just been too early for her. If it was like
now,
a year or two ago,
she
would have been in prime position.
Oh yeah, she'd be NXT champion. She probably would take Nia Jax's position.
Yeah. Funny thing though, she really doesn't need it since she has a pretty decent role on Glow now on Netflix.
Yeah. So good for her being still associated with the business, but not taking as crazy bumps.
Right. She kind of found a different way to go with the business. So Glow's a really good series if you haven't watched it yet.
I've heard good things.
Really, really good.
All right. So next up we have Jay Lethal versus Sanjay Dutt in the ladder for SoCal Val's love match.
So again, another in our long entry of stupid shit on a pole matches. It was a ladder match with a stupid thing suspended from above the ring match.
And a what the fuck was Vince Russo thinking match.
Yeah. So Sanjay Dutt and Jay Lethal are two of your kind of pinnacle X Division guys.
They were, along with AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, and Samoa Joe, like the original X Division.
Yeah, they were like
crew.
the main core guys.
And aside from the gimmick, this was a great match.
Yeah, so this is honestly about where I stopped watching the whole pay-per-view. I caught a little bit of this. From what I caught, super good.
Lots of good spots. Very athletic match, as you would expect from these two guys who Jay Lethal's now the ROH champion.
Has been for quite a while too now, right?
Yeah. And Sanjay Dutt, who was kind of in and out of ROH, and I believe currently is wrestling in India.
I think he's actually part of the Impact backstage creative team now too.
Is he?
Yeah, I think he's actually part of the
the office.
At least
At least they're using his talents in a better way than what they were back then.
So I think this actually may have been the first and only time I've actually seen Sanjay Dutt. That guy is in incredible shape.
Yeah, he's always been like that.
That was ridiculous.
Yeah. There was a couple of spots where I don't think anybody else could have taken those bumps if they weren't as healthy and as in good a shape as him.
Right. He definitely kind of seems like someone that was largely overlooked by...
100%.
Yeah. It's probably unfortunate he never got his big breakout. Probably was always just behind a couple other more talented people.
Yeah. He always had kind of a decent gimmick. For a while, he was just Jay Lethal's friend kind of thing. But once this came around, Jay Lethal was running his Black Machismo gimmick where he was essentially Randy Savage.
He's still running that gimmick. So.
Yeah. And this was kind of the pinnacle of the SoCal Val being his Miss Elizabeth kind of thing.
I'll be honest, I didn't get that part of it, but okay.
Yeah, this was like the end all be all of this kind of run.
I don't know anything about SoCal Val, but from watching this match, I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything.
You're not. She was a ring announcer. She was a valet, and that was pretty much it.
That's about to say, in a company where most of women are very talented wrestlers, she seemed to get kind of like Christy Hemme, where more or less you're an announcer or a backstage interviewer, your wrestling talents are highly limited.
Yes, exactly.
Kind of a rough spot to be in a company when it's full of really talented people.
Exactly. The match overall, like we said, was very good. Just the gimmick was so awful. You have an engagement ring sitting on a pillow that's on a little scaffold above the ring, and whoever gets the engagement ring gets to marry SoCal Val.
Yeah, and...
like, what the fuck?
This struck me as the more I see crazy ladder matches, the more I realize that they kind of need to actually be multiple person things. Like, I understand the first couple ladder matches, especially with like Shawn and Razor, were one-on-one and they're really good. But I think ever since TLC, TLC really upped the game. And you need to have multiple people in the match because when you're selling that you just got absolutely killed in a crazy high spot and the other person's going for the ladder, it takes something away when you suddenly have to come back to life and stop their ascent up the ladder.
Yeah.
Or you're stuck with the awful, oh man, getting up this ladder that I just ran up 10 minutes ago to suplex someone off of is now so incredibly difficult. And, oh, I can just one rung after. Let me try reaching for it. Well, I'm only halfway up the ladder and clearly never going to become anywhere close to this. And
it just doesn't work.
No, it takes you right back out of the match. I think nowadays you have to do ladder matches as multiple person things so someone can be dead and someone else can make the save.
Yeah, and if you notice, WWE has been doing that. At least having 3 to 4 people in a ladder match recently.
Like, honestly, I can't really think of a time when I last saw less than 6 people. It's like 6 people is now their ladder match number.
Yeah.
I'm fine with it.
So SoCal turns heel and punches Jay Lethal in the nuts as he's climbing up the ladder to all of a sudden quote unquote fall in love with Sanjay Dutt, and they get engaged in the middle of the ring and share a disgustingly sloppy makeout session.
Like you do.
All right. So, the one thing I wanted to mention is that for as good as these guys were, you could tell that they started to get tired at points tossing these ladders around and tossing each other around because Jay Lethal went to go do a slingshot into a ladder.
Was it when the ladder was... There was 2 ladders. One was set up and the other one was horizontal across the top?
Yep. And Sanjay Dutt was supposed to crack his head on it.
I saw that and he completely went under it.
Yep. And then stood back up and like walked into it or something. It was awful.
Yeah, they definitely botched that spot. He like way oversold it.
But this was also towards the very end of the match, and the match was a good, I want to say 15 minutes long. So it was the second longest match on the card. And I can only imagine hucking those ladders and another human body around would get kind of tiring.
Yeah, I imagine, but I'm going to go out and say it's still not so tiring that they have to crawl up a ladder.
And have it take forever.
Yeah, so I can understand botching a couple spots because of being tired. I don't like the selling of how long it takes to still climb a ladder.
Fair enough. All right, so next we have LAX, which is the Latin American exchange.
Yep.
Of Homicide and Hernandez, who had a very long run in Impact.
And in fact, they're actually back now.
They are.
They're back as the OG versus the new LAX.
Yep.
So, cool.
The original LAX was, at this time, being managed by Conan, which the new LAX is
managed by Conan.
Right.
Beer Money is James Storm and Robert Roode.
Yep. And they were the tag champs at the time. And they got thrown together as like a random team when they needed teams for their tag title tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And they came up with this gimmick where Bobby Roode, Robert Roode, was originally kind of like Mr. Wall Street and like came out in suits all the time and was all about the money.
He was originally part of Team Canada, wasn't he?
He was.
Okay, then he left Team Canada, was flying solo.
Yep, this was after they broke up Team Canada, after they had one of their international team cups or whatever tournaments they did.
Yeah, they do like once a year. They do a big international.
They have like Team USA, Team Canada, Team Mexico, Team Japan, and all this stuff. And then you have James Storm, who's coming out with drinking a beer and a cowboy hat on and cowboy boots. So they're all of a sudden Beer Money, which was actually a pretty good gimmick for a while.
Yeah, and I remember hearing some interviews years ago from these two saying they didn't necessarily get along, they didn't really hang out, but they just had decent chemistry in the ring, and it worked.
Yeah. They had a couple of funny spots where once they turned face, they were riding out on electrified
Beer coolers. Yeah,
it was they just had some funny spots, and they lasted together for a long time.
Yeah.
James Storm, up until after Beer Money broke up, was pretty much a tag team guy for his entire stint in TNA. He was part of America's Most Wanted with Wildcat Chris Harris.
Yep.
He turned on Chris Harris, and they had a whole big blowout where Chris Harris ended up leaving Impact Wrestling shortly after, and they stuck him back with another guy.
Yeah, Chris Harris even went to NXT. So James Storm did a one-off in NXT.
He was there for like a couple of matches and then disappeared.
Yeah.
And then had talked about coming back, but isn't now.
Yeah, James Storm had bad timing. He went to NXT for one or two matches, and it looked like it was going to be this big thing, and they were going to put him in a great spot. But then he turned around and signed with TNA.
Yep.
But this was right around the horrible mess where TNA was being sued by Billy Corgan for who actually owned the company, between him and Dixie Carter and Panda Energy. And they were trying to merge with Jeff Jarrett's new company, Global Wrestling.
And he eventually didn't get paid, so he left.
Yeah.
And went elsewhere to do indie things and never came back to NXT.
Yeah, that was and it didn't seem like there was any burned bridges really with NXT. It was just they kind of moved on from where they needed him. It was after they had moved some talent up to the main roster NXT had, and they kind of needed to fill some spots. But by the time he rolled back around, it looks like they'd filled back up.
Yeah, they had already filled him and had their new quote-unquote crop of talent. So Beer Money ends up retaining their titles in a okay match. It wasn't one of Beer Money's best, but during this time, these were kind of the two teams.
Yeah, they were kind of. We ain't got any other tag teams. Go out and do your thing, guys.
Right. It was kind of like how back recently you had like the New Day against the Bar or the New Day against the Usos. There wasn't really anybody else, so
it
it's
was kind of,
hey, here's a program, make it last 3 months.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on from that.
Yeah.
So next up we have a bizarre match.
So it was AJ Styles in an MMA match against Frank Trigg. So
because that's what's going to make everyone look great is putting your high-flying guy
against a shoot guy
in an MMA match.
So for those of you that don't follow any UFC at all, Frank Trigg had a couple, I think 1 or 2 stints in UFC and was also in Pride.
Pretty sure I don't know if he held the belt in UFC, but he was up there.
He faced George St. Pierre. He faced a couple of decent names.
Yeah,
but
he was
didn't-
big in the early days of the middle days of UFC. After it kind of came out of like the smoky back rooms and started becoming a legitimate thing on like Spike TV.
Yeah, he was around the same time as like Tito Ortiz, Chuck Liddell when they were hitting their heyday.
Yeah. So he was an early competitor against Matt Hughes and George St. Pierre in that division.
Yep.
So legitimate fighter against AJ Styles, who tough guy, not a legitimate fighter.
Not even close.
I'd already stopped watching by now. I may actually go back and watch just to see how bad this was, but bad?
Awful.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where you were sitting there thinking, why is this on a wrestling pay-per-view? And
did they even try to like make it like a MMA match?
oh, they tried very hard. Frank Trigg came out with his UFC black gloves, wasn't wearing any boots or anything, but yet here's AJ Styles wearing the same black gloves and his kick pads and his boots and his wrestling tights.
So
And it gets better. They had the ref wear the black shirt and the gloves like UFC was doing at the time. And guy was wearing all black with the gloves on. And they even did the, are you ready? Are you ready? All right, let's go.
So, literally a decade before this was about the time Ken Shamrock came into WWF with the awful Lions Den match, which was like a quarter-sized UFC octagon with extra tall walls, and it was horrendous. And I'm pretty sure Brawl for All had already happened again, almost a decade before this. Shoot fighting and wrestling doesn't mix.
Nope.
New Japan tried it almost to the destruction of the company.
And surprisingly enough, the fans didn't think it was going to work either.
All that you get when you try having a legitimate MMA match inside of a wrestling ring in a wrestling world is horribly exposing wrestling.
Yeah, AJ Styles did not look good in this until afterwards when he hit his phenomenal forearm and cracked Frank Trigg with a kendo stick a couple of times.
Yeah, real fighting and professional wrestling are so vastly different that the more you try to combine them, the worse wrestling looks.
Especially when you have your fans sitting there chanting, "This is bullshit. We want wrestling and fire Russo."
That's a great sign.
All throughout the course of this 6-minute match.
It was 6 minutes?
6 minutes. It was supposed to be 2 5-minute rounds. It barely lasted into the next one because somebody called for it to stop.
Good. Yeah. About the best you can get from MMA these days is you can pull a few submissions that look good, but are still able to be done in a fake way.
Like Ronda Rousey with her armbar.
Yep.
Like
Rousey's armbar isn't done right. Like Undertaker with the
Hell's Gate.
omoplata, which doesn't look at all.
You have
Brock Lesnar doing the Kimura.
Yep, you have Shayna Baszler doing the rear naked choke.
Right. Having done some MMA myself, I just have to say, it annoys me when they do Brock Lesnar with the Kimura saying he's breaking people's arm. A Kimura doesn't actually hurt when your elbow gets bent the normal way your elbow bends. It hurts when your hand is in the middle of your back and is pulled upwards towards your neck.
Yeah.
It can't break your elbow. It'll destroy your shoulder.
But it's when you bend something the way that it's supposed to be bent, it doesn't work like that.
No. So, fun fact, if you ever see Brock Lesnar putting the Kimura on and it's holding someone's arm out straight and then it suddenly bends, like the way your arm normally bends, doesn't hurt.
He's not actually breaking somebody's arm.
No. There's my inside wrestling tip of the day.
I feel like that shouldn't have to be a tip, but hey.
Hey, I know a thing. I'm going to share the thing I know, damn it.
All right, so then we have the main event, which was supposed to be Christian Cage, a.k.a. just Christian, versus Kurt Angle versus Samoa Joe versus Booker T for the TNA heavyweight title.
Right. There had actually been preliminary matches to figure out who was going to challenge for Joe's title in the weeks leading up to this. they did the audience in the arena a real big disservice on this one.
Yeah, Booker T didn't end up showing up because it was in the middle of Hurricane Ike.
Yeah, so
He couldn't actually fly to the arena to get there.
He was literally just stuck in Houston and could not get
Which,
out of the city.
coincidentally enough, has happened again to him and happened a few years ago.
Oh yeah, back when
He was on commentary for Raw, he couldn't make it because he was stuck in Houston.
Houston basically, or it wasn't Houston, it was Corpus Christi got
Destroyed.
nailed.
Yeah.
That was a bad one.
So these three guys, Christian, Kurt Angle, Samoa Joe. This was after Christian had been in TNA for a while at this point.
Yeah, he had been there almost 3 years at this point. He had actually been NWA champion when it was NWA TNA.
Yep, when they had the 10 pounds of gold and all of that going on.
Right, before they kind of pulled an ECW and booted TNA out of the thing.
These three guys are some of the best workers in the business during this time. They were definitely some of the top guys in this company at the time.
Right. Christian was pushed to a ridiculous I mean, I say ridiculous as in scale, not because of it was ridiculous for him. He was like their number one guy to the point where he was almost in the Stone Cold role for their company, where
yeah, he would go against the authority figures of Impact Wrestling, but then he would also do the whole heel thing.
Yeah, he could show up. He's a tweener the entire way. He could knock out anyone at any time, and he was a legitimate threat to anyone.
Yeah, and they booked him very strong throughout most of his tenure in TNA.
And I mean, it really benefited him when he came back to WWE and basically walked right into the main event picture of, granted, ECW, but
but this also ended up getting him his coveted world titles in WWE.
Yeah.
Then you have Kurt Angle, who I don't think we need to go over his accolades.
No, and
wrestling.
Let it be known that Angle spent more time in TNA than he did in WWE, and he definitely developed as
a lot.
Yeah. And he was already amazing before he went there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he developed his addiction problems worse while he was there.
They were pretty bad when he left. They got worse when he was there.
Yeah. So TNA really did him no favors on that front.
And then you have Samoa Joe, who at this time is coming off of his major ROH run, where he comes into Impact Wrestling and goes undefeated for a year.
Yeah, and I mean, he's TNA World Champ at this point, and cut back to present day, a decade later, he's the best heel on SmackDown, definitely, possibly in the company.
Yeah, for sure. Overall, it was a good match. It wasn't what I was hoping for out of these three guys, especially when Jeff Jarrett shows up, because why not insert yourself when you're booking the company into the main event picture? Because that's exactly what any smart booker actually does.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so now we can kind of pull back and talk about the company as a whole in a little bit bigger picture here, I think. Jarrett was always kind of this pervasive thing that kept coming and going and just kind of screwing up TNA.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing when you have somebody like Vince McMahon who puts the WWF title on himself to advance a storyline and then drops it relatively soon after that.
Sure.
Or when Stephanie McMahon has the women's title and drops it to a legitimate competitor.
Right.
But when you have somebody like Jeff Jarrett who shows up and has the most title reigns for the main event in the company's history.
Yeah, it ends up kind of just squatting on the title for umpteen weeks at a time.
It's upsetting when you have guys like Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe and AJ Styles, Christian Cage, all of these guys, Jay Lethal, all of these guys who could be your heavyweight champion, and you're just letting them flounder because you're putting yourself over.
Right. So instead of letting TNA really develop into a true competitor to WWE, which I would argue it never was. It was never a true competitor. It was a viable alternative, but it never competed with them in ratings on any front.
No.
Halfway because it was always Jeff Jarrett's vanity project.
Mm-hmm.
If you're always never fully committed to being what it could be and always kind of having too much of a grip on it, it's never going to fully develop and become what it can be.
And you start to get, along the same lines, a lot of story issues when you have guys popping in and out, guys flip-flopping from company to company and coming in and out and things like that. Especially when you get into the issue that they had with faction issues. You have guys that are doing things like flopping in and out of the company.
Uh-huh.
You're getting story issues when Jarrett's showing up, winning the belt, holding it, and then disappearing, showing up, winning the belt, and then disappearing. And then you get the faction issues.
Yeah, so you end up with... So I'm a fan of factions, but I'm not a fan of one dominant faction that's taking over the entire company. Like, the NWO was cool at first, but when it becomes too big and too much of a juggernaut where it's everyone against that one thing, that's not... There's a built-in shelf life to that sort of feud. And clearly no one realizes that, and they always end up going way, way too long.
Yeah, and I mean, you have... This was kind of the start of their faction issues. By the way, if you can hear, we
suddenly have a
visitor.
guest on the show.
Blossom, my dog, decided to walk upstairs and see both of us while we're sitting here. So this is kind of the start of where their faction issues were. So there wasn't a whole lot of factions in TNA beforehand.
It seemed like there was Team Canada, but that was a respectable size, and also because it kind of crossed divisions. It was like a tag team and like one heavyweight guy and one tiny guy in the X division. So,
but then you would get to this point where Sting cuts a promo at the beginning of this pay-per-view talking about how there's a lot of guys in the back who they're men, they have respect, they know how to get respect and things like that. Then you flip it where he's also talking about how there's a lot of guys in the back who also are babies. They're children. They don't gain the respect, or they don't even ask for respect. They just kind of cry about things. And this starts off one of the worst factions that I've ever heard in the main event Mafia.
Yeah, and which it's almost literally now picking up where WCW left off, where it was the New Blood versus the Millionaire Club.
Exactly. You had guys like Sting, Kurt Angle, Kevin Nash, Booker T, kind of joining this faction where we're the guys who have been in the main event. We're going to make sure that we stay in the main event. Scott Steiner ends up joining them, and it turns into them versus guys like AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, all of the TNA quote-unquote originals, which is what they called themselves at the beginning.
And we had talked about this last week, I believe it was last week at least, where one of WCW's problems is when it became, hey, here's all the old WWF guys, let's main event them and start forgetting about all of our own homegrown talent.
And that's exactly what happened during this time. This was the start of the downfall times of Impact Wrestling. It didn't work.
Yeah, why should anyone watch your product when what you're saying to the fans is our rejects from the other company are better than our talent?
It's not going to work. It's never going to work like that.
What is the draw there? Like guys like Kurt Angle shouldn't be going, yes, I'm in the main event Mafia. It should be going, no, this place gave me the opportunity to be better than I was, and I was already great.
Right. Or you have guys like Sting, who I've never been a part of that other company.
Right.
I'm going to stay here and I'm going to help grow this company like I did WCW.
Yeah, it's a little bit too much of the pulling back the curtain thing, and it just feels like, you start asking yourself, why do I want to watch this then? Like, if these guys are right, then why do I want to watch this?
Exactly. And the fact that during the time of the main event Mafia, they introduced like a mid-card belt called the Legends belt. And two guys out of the main event Mafia are holding almost all the belts at once.
So if the main event Mafia's whole point is we're just going to fight amongst ourselves for the belts?
Like that would make sense. That would be something completely different. Like, we're going to monopolize the main event for just us. Why would you then introduce a mid-card belt?
Right. And why would you if you're really the main event mafia and we're not going to let anyone else in, why would you fight on camera with anyone? Because now they're getting great because they're with you. And why are you giving that away?
You're facing someone in the main event.
Right.
Who's not in your group.
Like, just, it doesn't make sense. And if we assume that for whatever reason it does make sense, then it puts the company down.
Yeah.
Like, there is a certain level of suspension of disbelief we all need to go through in order to watch wrestling. We all get that. But this pushes that too far, and
it doesn't make...
And it insults everyone's intelligence.
And it doesn't make the most of what you have either.
Yeah. I get that the idea is, hey, eventually when our guys come and win at the end of the day, they look even better. But that's naturally going to be inferred by you facing these legends.
Right. All right.
That's enough of us complaining about this. Let's throw the towel in on this.
All right. So real quick, we'll wrap up and talk about the IWF show that we went to last Friday.
Yay! We'll end on a happy note. Sounds like a plan. We'll be right back.
All right. So last Friday, it was September 7th, right?
Yes.
We went to an independent wrestling show for IWF, the International Wrestling Federation, out in Brockport. We've been to it a bunch of times before, but we weren't doing this when we went to the other ones.
No, we weren't.
So we just wanted to kind of talk about, what we saw and how we think that this kind of should be something that you guys go and see.
Yeah, definitely.
So they always have at least, 6 to 7 matches over the course of the night?
8, usually. I would say usually they do like 4, have an intermission, and then have the other 4.
Yeah. These guys are all local guys. I mean, you get guys from Buffalo, from Rochester, from Binghamton.
Yeah, I think a couple even said they were in from Chicago, so maybe a little bit further, but pretty much northeast U.S.
Yeah, and you get these guys who are doing this because they love the business, and they're doing it to hopefully get eyes from somewhere else and do something.
Right.
With WWE or, another company.
ROH, yeah, Impact even at this point. I know some of the guys that were on the show have been on Impact shows before.
Yep, and they've also been in ROH shows before. Sean Carr, for instance, has been wrestled in ROH. And
he was just on a recent Impact pay-per-view.
Yep, an Impact one night only that was in Binghamton. That was co-sponsored with Excite Wrestling. So you get these guys who they're doing this for fun, but they also love the business so much that
they're doing this because they love it, not because they're making dozens and dozens of thousands of dollars.
Right. They're doing this in the hopes of getting to that point.
Or just because they're passionate about wrestling.
Yeah. So one of the matches that kind of stood out, we had the IWF heavyweight champ, Terrell TK Kenneth, against Mikey Every Night. Now, the size difference between these two guys is insane.
So Mikey Every Night is literally billed at 171 pounds. Terrell Kenneth is billed at 340. Literally double.
Yeah. And you get these guys squaring off, and it was a beatdown, pretty much. But
definitely David versus Goliath match.
It was one of those where Mikey Every Night was doing his, I have heart, I'm going to keep fighting this, I'm not just going to lay down, because he yelled that at me 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, so being completely transparent, we sometimes tend to root for the heels at times.
And we heckle.
We may heckle a little bit.
But it's fun.
It's kind of part of being at an independent wrestling show. You can actually interact with the wrestlers during the match.
It's not like a WWE match where they're there to put on their match and they leave and listen for a crowd reaction. We're sitting next to a gate, which is 5 feet from the ring, not even, and we're yelling stuff at them. They're yelling stuff back at us. It's
great.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Great match. TK looked amazing as usual.
He's a big guy that moves like a really agile big guy. I'm not going to say he moves like a cruiserweight, but think Bam Bam Bigelow. Think Vader.
Yeah.
Think Bray Wyatt, but bigger.
Yeah, he's running around this ring like he's 200 pounds, and he's doing moves like he's Braun Strowman.
Yeah.
Next match we had that was one of the better matches of the card was Sean Carr against
Brandon Thurston in a street fight.
And let me tell you, these guys, I don't think they will ever, if they're facing each other, put on a poor match.
Yeah, I mean, Sean Carr and Brandon Thurston are probably technical ability-wise the best that IWF has. Promo-wise, they're probably also the best. Brandon's promo was really good.
His promo was amazingly funny.
And these guys are going to elevate whoever they're in the ring with. And when they're in the ring together, it's really good chemistry and it's a really good fight.
Yeah. It was fun to watch. It was entertaining. There was a bunch of good like comedy spots in it too.
Yeah, there was humor without it being a pure comedy gimmick match. And there was legitimate times when I thought someone's not walking away from this.
Yeah.
Like a T-bone suplex through a chair.
Yeah, it was a great match, and I can't wait to see what they're going to do with this next.
I'm assuming this was probably a blow-off match between the two of them.
Nope, I want more.
Okay. I mean, you can want more. I'm just saying I don't think you're going to get more of
Falco, if you're listening, either one of the Falcos, I want more Sean Carr and Brandon Thurston.
I want more of both, too. I just don't need them against each other. That's fine, too. I'll take whatever. I'm not picky.
So then after that, we had the Ultimate Access match, which was another one of the ones that stood out later on in the night.
They did this properly. They had 6 people in their ladder match.
They did. And this is kind of like their Money in the Bank. Somebody climbs the ladder, pulls a trophy down. They now get a heavyweight title shot whenever they want in the future.
Whenever they decide to cash in the trophy. Catch being, it's a little bit like New Japan with the G1 Climax tournament where not only do you win this as a prize, this is now something you have to defend too, though.
Yes. Somebody could take it away. Somebody could put it up for grabs for another feud that's going on before they cash in for the title. So this ended up having a lot of the better guys in this match, and there was a lot of those ladder spots.
Yeah, they had some rough ladder landings.
I mean, Ron Falco gets powerbombed into a ladder in the corner, cuts his back open a little bit.
Yeah, Jordan Falco with the swanton onto the ladder that's on top of Gavin or Skyrose.
Mike Skyrose. There was a couple of things like that where it's just you watch them and you're like, don't do that. Why would you do that?
Yeah, even like, listen, I know wrestling is scripted. Why did you just do that to yourself, though?
Mm-hmm.
There's no way to land on top of a ladder that doesn't suck. It's an aluminum ladder.
So James Sega ended up winning the match.
Yeah, so former tag team wrestler in the Buffalo Club.
And might I say, good for him.
Yeah.
He stood out in this match.
He always kind of stood out to me as he always played a heel, but I could tell that this is just a good human being. He always... Not during his match, not taking away from his character, but there were just things he would do that I really appreciated as a fellow human being.
I mean, when the guy comes out with a T-shirt with the suicide prevention hotline phone number on it that says help someone if they need it kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And when he has different Bible verses written on his wrist tape.
Yeah, wrist tape. It's just, there's
I could tell something about the guy.
Yeah, he's a good dude, and it comes out. And it didn't take away from his character when he was playing a full-blown heel. I don't think he's going to be a full-blown heel anymore.
No, not from that match.
No, he had a lot of great spots.
Mm-hmm.
They made him look golden, and he took that ball and ran with it. And I'm very glad.
Especially when TK came out, and they're standing next to each other, and you didn't realize how big Sega is until he's next to a very large man in TK, and you're like, oh, maybe he could win this.
Yeah, and they were... And the great thing that IWF was doing is, even during the ladder match, they did some strongman spots with Sega and showing that, yeah, this isn't a small guy. He can pick up 2 guys at once, no problem.
Yeah, I mean, he had... Who was it?
I think it was Skyros and Ron Falco.
Yeah, two of the bigger guys in the match.
Yeah.
And he had both of them on his shoulders at one time.
Yeah, it was a great showing for Sega. Really happy for him.
Yeah, and again, if you guys are interested at all in this, I put out their Twitter on when I retweet our episodes coming out. I copy a link to them in our Facebook page.
Yeah, their next show comes up in late October.
I believe so, yes.
I think it's October 20-something. Don't quote me on that right now, but I'm sure we'll link it when it gets closer to. But yeah, it's a great show.
It's a cheap night. It's fun. Again, don't expect the super big budget WWE stuff, but you're going to have a good time no matter what. And it's supporting a bunch of local guys.
Budget Buster Tag Team it's a comedy thing, but it's the best done comedy I've seen in wrestling in a long time.
When you have these two guys come out to do a move and they point to the air and yell, "Wrestling!" at the top of their lungs, it's perfect.
Or when one of the guys in the ring is doing his own play-by-play for the entire time he's in the ring.
He gets hit in the nuts and he yells, "Oh my gosh, my balls!"
It's great. It's really funny. It's super entertaining, and it's just fun.
They're those guys that they put on after a break to kind of amp everything up. So if you guys feel the need, or if you guys want to support your local wrestling, I'm assuming you would, listening to us doing stuff like this, go see this show.
All right. That's enough yapping from us for this week.
Yeah,
this was a long one. Sorry, everyone.
You got time.
Yep. All right. You want to get the plugs out there?
Sure. Facebook, we're at Twitter at what is it? Because I can never remember.
Twitter is WrestleHistPod.
There we go. We're on Google Play Music, Spotify, and iTunes now.
Yep. Wrestling History Podcast and all of those. If you ever want to email us, wrestlinghistorypodcast@gmail.com.
Give us some stuff that we can go back and watch, and we'll decide if we want to talk about it. If not, oh well.
You're at our mercy if you don't.
All right. I think we're good.
All right. That's it. We're history.